Lesson 24 is a really, really, really good summary of everything we've touched on, and I'll give you the answer now. It's going to lead to a situation which is going to lead to chumras, where we're going to have to be machmir. And the reason why, because you're going to see when we go through Lesson 24, why it's going to always be on the bad side of things. So it's a good summary with a quote-unquote negative result, which we haven't had too many of those. So let's talk about the case. We're going to break down the case very carefully. So let's actually jump to page 232 at the top. Here's what happened. So people are preparing food, and what do? They made a potato soup with milk and cheese. And they realized, what did they use to stir this pot with? They used a fleshik ladle that they used earlier that day, meaning it's now Moshe Shabbos, and earlier in the day, that fleshik ladle was used for whatever the cholent, and now it's being used to stir this potato soup, this milchik potato soup. Okay. Not only that, but they, cleaned up everything, they put it away, they wanted to help out their mother, right? Now, before we look and break it down, what questions would you need to ask to analyze this situation? So again, I'm going to tell you it's an Eino Ben Yomo spoon, or ladle, being used in a 100% milchik dish. What are the questions that we need to ask? Okay, let's assume that it's not really good. It's a good question. Meaning, is again, remember, go up and down that entire spoon. Remember, we discussed it last time. It was only what part that was inserted, right? Remember that? What? We'll say I have to do 160. It's a great question. Let's assume. Let's talk about worst case scenario, that we do not have shishim against our spoon. We don't have 60 times the spoon in our pot. Now, what else we need to figure out? Where was this spoon being used? In what type of scenario? We have to find out. Was this used to stir on the flame? Like, kind of like to stir the pot together? Maybe once it was cooled off, we have to be able to ascertain when that was. Very good. So let's take a look at 232 at the bottom. And let's begin. Bullet point 1. The meat ladle used to serve the milk needs to be kosher because it was placed into a kli rishon, which is really omer al gabei ha'esh. So for sure, the taste of the milk went inside the ladle. That's for sure going to happen. And we already established it's an Eino Ben Yomo ladle, so that's why we're in trouble. So whether the pot needs to be koshered is going to depend when the last time the ladle was used. And since we use it on Shabbos, which is earlier that day, we are going to actually need to kosher the pot because we're going to do Hagal on the pot. Well, just think about it. It's like you're having the milchik is going inside your ladle. Your ladle is fresh, meaty taste, which is going to render your entire spoon treif. That spoon is being used in a hot scenario to stir up your soup, your potato soup, and now you don't have enough of the milchiks against the spoon, against your ladle, so now you have an entity of treif sitting in a pot. Guess what happens to your pot? And your pot becomes treif. Okay? Very good. Now we have a bad spoon, we have a bad pot. Now what about the bowl that we're going to transfer it in? Well, guess what? Guess what happens if you don't have a good spoon, you don't have a good pot? The bowl that you're going to that's going to contain this treif soup is also going to be problematic. That's the next bullet point on top of 233. The bowls had food poured on them from a treif ladle. There are opinions that maintain that once the ladle is removed from the pot, it becomes a klisheni. However, most of the achronim actually hold that the ladle should be treated as a kli rishon, because after all, right, meaning generally speaking, the ladle is being totally immersed when it's boiling hot. You're ladling it out. So if you were to, let's say, take it off the flame and cool out, you don't want to, for every reason, you want to have a cold soup or a cool soup or whatever, okay, then there's room to be lenient here. If it's a boiling hot soup, even if you've taken it off the flame, it's still mamish boiling hot. It's cooled down a little bit, there's more room to be lenient. Okay, let's say we're talking about worst case scenario, right? Boiling hot soup, you've ladled it out. Okay, so we treat the ladle as a kli rishon, and therefore the dishes are considered to have contracted hot food poured from a kli rishon. Now, the silverware, the cutlery, is considered to have contacted hot food as a kli sheni. So you have your bowl, which is a kli rishon, come in contact with non-kosher hot food, kli rishon. Let's go with your spoon that you're having your soup with, is going to be in contact with the kli sheni. Okay. It's not going to matter. It's all treif. All that matters. It's all treif. Yeah. So look. If there's significant hesed meruba, decision to be mako, you know what I mean? You could say that maybe the ladle's only not treated as a kli rishon, as a kli sheni. There's going to be more lenient, but worst case scenario, it could be pretty bad. Yeah, it's a pretty bad situation. Now, let's talk about our silverware. So if we go to Hilchot Shabbos, we'd say, kli sheni, maybe our spoon would be okay, right? Kli sheni is edam mavasha, right? We know that. That's the halacha by Hilchot Shabbos. So if it's not mavasha, maybe our spoon would be okay. So before we answer the question, go to the bottom, please, of page 233. Here we go, the bottom of 233. Rav Yitzchak, the son of Rav of Dimi, recounted, once I entered the bathhouse after Rabbi, and I asked him if he would like a flask of oil put into the hot bathtub in order to warm the flask. He answered me, draw water out from the bathtub, which is considered a kli rishon with another kli, so that become a kli sheni, and then place a flask inside that utensil to warm the flask of oil. So I have a flask of cold oil over here, and I don't want to take directly water out of the bathhouse, which is kli rishon, but instead take a kli, pour it into another kli, and then take my oil and put it into that kli sheni to heat up. That's what we do. This is actually, you need to do that when you want to heat up milk for a baby. Your baby can't have the milk hot, cold water. You have to warm it up a little bit. You have to use the same way. What do we learn from here? Halacha, that a utensil that's a kli sheni is not mavasha. And why? We see from here, therefore, it's why it's permissible, it's mutter to place a flask of oil into it on Shabbos. That's the Hilchot Shabbos dimension. Okay. The Beis Yosef, right, the great Rav Yosef Karo says, it's difficult to say that there's a difference between cooking on Shabbos, cooking non-kosher food. In both instances, the definition of cooking is the same. Therefore, a kli sheni doesn't cook in either situation. According to the Bet Yosef, the Mechaber holds Shabbos and cooking. Cooking is cooking. What's the difference between cooking tray for cooking on Shabbos? Bishul is bishul. If a kli sheni is not mevashel on Shabbos, it won't be mevashel when it comes to kashrus issues. Now, the reason that a first degree hard vessel cooks, that a kli rishon cooks, even when they're off the fire, is because the walls are hot and they retain the heat. Meaning, if I have a pot on the element and I remove it from the element, right, or if I take it from the element and I pour it into another kli, it's a kli rishon, right, it's still very hot. The reason a second degree hot vessel doesn't cook, even when it's still very hot, is because the walls of the second vessel are cold, and the food begins to cool immediately when placed into it. The food cannot cool and cook at the same time. Meaning, when I have a kli sheni, the reason why we're lenient by a kli sheni is because the moment I pour something hot into it, since the walls ahead of time were room temperature, which is considered cold, the moment that happens, the food that goes into it will automatically, the temperature will begin to plummet. And there's no cooking, there's no bishul that is going to take place. So, here we go. Take a look at second degree infusions. Everyone agrees that a second degree hard vessel doesn't cook. Meaning, everyone agrees that a kli sheni, there's no bishul. But it can still transfer taste, according to some opinions. Meaning, there's still some ta'am that can still be imparted. Can you think of an example where taste is transferred from one food to another without cooking? Meaning, can you think of a case where you could transfer taste without heat? The answer is very simple. If I take a tea bag and I put a tea bag into warm water, put a tea bag into cold water, taste is transferred, no? The water has a tea flavor. You don't always need, remember, this is important, you don't always need heat to transfer taste. It might not be halachic bishul, so it could be on Shabbos should be okay. That's where Moshe's great proof. Moshe, some people say, I don't understand, take a tea bag. Some people want to be machmer by a tea bag, because what do they say? That there's bishul even by klisheni bli klishishi. You take a tea bag, you put it into water. Water always turns into tea. The answer is, yeah, it doesn't do hot water. You put a tea bag into cold water, and what happens to your cold water? There'll be some taste that's going to be imparted. So we see you don't always need bishul, you don't always need heat to transfer taste, right? So that, if that is true, it is not cooking, but it transfer taste. It makes sense that a certain amount of heat can transfer taste, but yet it doesn't actually cook the food. So therefore, what happens at the molecular level, the transferring of taste, even though the story about the Shabbos proves that a hot klisheni doesn't cook, it doesn't necessarily prove that tam isn't transferred. What do I mean? One, there are those that hold, bottom of 234, that a second degree hot vessel does not cook, that a klisheni is not mavashal. But such a status does cause food taste to be absorbed into the outer layer, like kadei klipa. That a klisheni can impart, like a kadei klipa. Two, for those who hold that a klisheni causes taste to be expelled, maflid, and to be mavliya, and absorbed throughout the whole food, but not at the same time. Meaning, i.e. it is either absorbed or is expelled once per each incident. So it doesn't go back and forth, only once. Exactly how it manifests itself is maybe perhaps for another time. Three, to those in the second degree, doesn't transfer at all. And in fact, in a case of great financial loss, that's the Taz holds, you can rely on this. Four, the Shach is machmir when it comes to kli cheres, or food, that a second degree hot vessel is able to expel and causes taste to be absorbed into the outer layer of the klipa. However, he is not strict in a case where there is a financial loss. Concerning metal, silverware, he is lenient in that a klisheni will not even make the outer layer kadei klipa. So, we see here, there are certain pins that are machmir, certain pins that are meka. What's the halacha? Take a look at the good reason to be strict, that second paragraph, the second sentence. A great sage and scholar named Rabbi says the following: since Hagala is not considered difficult, it's preferable that one should not rely on the Mekel opinions. However, in the case of a glazed coffee cup or earthenware dishes that you might have had in the sink, since they can't really be koshered, you can rely on the Mekel opinion that a klisheni doesn't transfer at all. This is an important kula, since otherwise you have to throw these dishes, because the kli cheres cannot be koshered. So we see that there is room, especially when it comes to forks and spoons, if they come in contact with the klisheni, since it's not considered so difficult to kosher with a gala, you should really kosher forks and spoons in such a situation. Now, if you can create one suffix, one doubt, the whole thing would fall apart and be lenient. Meaning, if you would say, maybe when I use that pot, when I actually put my, when I poured it out, maybe it cooled off already. Or, I had it off the burner for a really long time. It might have cooled off. Or maybe I transferred it twice before it got to my spoon, So any time you could throw in a little bit of a doubt, a suffix, then we could be lenient by your klisheni. But because this Rabbi Kiva Eger, who says, you know what, how difficult is it to kosher your kelim, to kosher your spoon or fork, so therefore you should try to do it. Most dishes, though, you can't really kosher dishes, or many dishes are difficult to kosher, so there's more room to be lenient by those, but metal forks and spoons, you're going to potentially, even by a klisheni, you should try and kosher them. So it depends what the bowl is made out of. If the bowl is going to be made out of something which is kosherable by Hagala, something kosher by Hagala. Meaning, you're never going to need to blast it in a furnace because it was never Kli Rishon, right? But if it's a metal bowl that you can kosher, so you should probably kosher it. And right, which you can't kosher, in which case with the Rizal Dimion, right? Okay. We're going to talk about that right now. Great question. Very good question. Can't kosher plastic. It's not financial. Right, can't kosher plastic. So either you just throw it out, or there's maybe lenient that if it's a klisheni, then you could rely on those opinions of the Shach, who says that a klisheni is okay. That's the clean. Yeah. Okay. Now, I want to throw in, because it's an important topic. It's a little complicated, but it's worthwhile doing, and that is the following: if something is not intrinsically forbidden, then you could rely, Tapas 236, on the majority, on the rove. I'll explain that for a second. Meaning, since the non-kosher plates and silverware got mixed up with kosher ones, so I only trafed up, let's say, one fork, one spoon, and one knife, and they are now being mixed up in a whole bunch of forks, spoons, and knives. Forget it. Go according to the rove, go according to the majority. Say, I don't know which spoon it is. I don't know which fork it is. Therefore, what should we do? I don't kosher anything. So I don't know which fork it is. I don't know which knife it is. I've now put everything back, as you mentioned. Maybe we could say, forget it, just leave it. After all, I got 3, perhaps, kelim that need to be kosher, and 25 and 30 that are 100% strictly kosher. However, there's one problem with that rationale. There's a concept in halacha called davar sheyesh lo matirin. Davar sheyesh lo matirin means there's something which eventually will make this item become permissible. In such a case, we do not rely on rove. We don't rely on the majority. I will explain what that means. The classic example is the following. Let's say by mistake George cooks on Shabbos and he makes hard-boiled egg, chicken. Either he forgot it was Shabbos or he didn't realize it was Aser to cook on Shabbos, whatever the case may be. Shogeg. Halacha is he can't eat that food on Shabbos. They made a knas. After Shabbos, he can eat that food. If it's been mazed on purpose, I know that it's Shabbos from cooking anyways, he can never eat that food. If he made a mistake, he woke up in the morning, wanted to make his mother breakfast in bed, he thought it was Sunday of Mother's Day, instead made eggs, brings upstairs his mother, says, what are you doing at Shabbos? What were you thinking? Right? In such a case, you'd be allowed to eat those eggs Motzei Shabbos. How soon after Motzei Shabbos? The amount of time that it takes to make eggs. How long does it take to make eggs? 5 minutes. 5 minutes after Shabbos is over, allowed to eat the eggs. So, those eggs, if they get mixed up with other eggs that were 100% permissible, you can't eat any of the eggs. Why? Since those eggs will become permissible, meaning I have 3 eggs, one that was cooked on Shabbos and 2 that were not. Since one of those 3 eggs will be permitted tonight, we don't nullify this batch because it's called davar sheyesh lo matirin. Something will even make this permissible will be tonight. Therefore, this mixture is not permissible now on Shabbos. You can't eat it till after Shabbos. That's called davar sheyesh lo matirin. That it will by itself become permissible. By the way, some people talk about chametz on Pesach, right? Chametz on Pesach is a problem, and after Pesach, no problem with chametz. It's like a davar sheyesh lo matirin. It's never batal. It never comes nullified. Give you another example. The classic example the Gemara gives is an egg which is hatched on Yom Tov. an egg based on Shenoda b'Yom Tov. Now to eat an egg that was hatched on Yom Tov. If you eat it after Yom Tov. So if that egg gets mixed up with other eggs, you have to wait till Yom Tov. Certain eggs you're allowed to eat if they're hatched on Yom Tov. It's complicated. I don't know right now. But again, things that will eventually become permitted, you just have to wait a little bit. Those never get nullified. And the rationale is, why should they become nullified? Because they're going to be permitted, you just have to wait a little bit of time. So, therefore, turn the page to 237. Mixed up utensils. The Mechaber says that if a kli that absorbed taste from a forbidden isser is mixed up with other vessels, it's nullified. The Ramah explains that the cost of doing the koshering by Hagala makes it a regular case of a mixture with forbidden food, and not something that would eventually become permitted on its own, i.e., not something which is davar shishel matirin. The Shach brings those that argue. The Maril argues that the cost of doing koshering by boiling is minimal. Therefore, the Shach maintains that one should be strict unless there's a significant financial loss. Meaning, mixed up utensils. You have a treif spoon and you have a treif knife, and they get mixed up with kosher ones. Even though the Mechaber and the Ramah are lenient, the Shach is machmir. The Shach is machmir and says you should kosher everything unless there's a significant financial loss. What would be the significant financial loss? You're a caterer and you have a dinner tonight, and there's no way you're going to do hagala and everything because the dinner's in 2 hours, right? You're a significant financial loss. You're doing a big dinner, some very complicated situation. That'd be room to be lenient. And the Shach even adds the significant financial loss, you should wait 24 hours before using it. According to the Taz, all the dishes need to be kosher because there's a chance that they all may be used at once, in which case you'll for sure be using something which is aser. This is a very big chumrah. I told you today's going to be chumrah day. Right? A very big chumrah. Because it goes almost against many principles that we've learned before. And the reason being is because of these strict opinions, which again, doesn't have to be lenient. It has to be meruba if you're really stuck. But generally speaking, we should try, even if a treif fork gets mixed in with all your other forks, you should really kosher everything, which is to some extent a little bit counterintuitive because there's rov and da. But since it's easy to do, hagala is considered easy to do, we should do it. Okay. Take a look at the bottom of 237. In the case where it is exceedingly difficult to kosher all your dishes, the Pischei Tshuva brings the Chavas Yair, who says it is still considered something that will eventually be permitted. It's considered something which is davar sheish l'matirin. However, the Chochmas Adam holds that in a case that involves going through the trouble of koshering process, the non-kosher dish is not something that will eventually be permitted. If it will take a great effort to kosher it, you can ask a rabbi to be potentially to be lenient. So we see at least there's a Chochmas Adam here, which gives us a little bit of help, which is if it really is considered a tircha gedola to kosher everything, then we're going to say that it is permissible to use to want to kosher it. But generally speaking, to kosher a few things would be, we should ask you to do it. To kosher all of a sudden all your kelim, that's really considered a great difficulty. To kosher everything, then perhaps there is room a little bit to be lenient, which is why for a lot of these things it's worthwhile making that phone call, because maybe there's another petach, another opening that we could say to allow these dishes to be used and not to have such a headache. So sometimes if whoever did it, if they cry enough, if they say, "Oh, this in time, and I got Shabbos is coming, I have guests coming," so there's potentially room to be lenient in those situations. Because you see, really, Mikaradin, Ramah says it's permissible, Mechaber says it's permissible, but there's a Shach, there's a later Achron, it comes a couple hundred years later on his commentary on the Shulchan Aruch, who's becoming strict, and therefore that kind of twists everything to the more strict opinion. Okay, I went to that very quickly. Yeah, question.
Here it says that he saved his earthenware dishes from being trashed because it was majority.
Right. Again.
Because it was put away. It was put away, and they didn't know which one.
Yeah, that's what it is. So therefore, it's bata. Therefore, it becomes nullified with all my other dishes. And since I can't kosher it, I only obviously need to throw it out. No, we're not going to say you have to throw it out. The only reason we're being strict because I can do hagala, which is considered easy to do.
If you know which bull it is.
If I know which bull it is, so then you got to kosher the bull. You're saying if I know which bull it is, I should throw it out. So he even said earlier, if I'm not mistaken, the bull needs to be koshered. Here, take a look at 4, page 235. The shachas with regard to earthenware klichas, the secondary hadith. Right, he's not machmir in a case where there is financial loss. Yeah. One bull might not necessarily be a financial loss. Right. And metal silverware, he holds, is more lenient because it doesn't really penetrate kedei klipa because it's metal. It doesn't absorb as easily, whereas klicheres, even it enters more readily. So it's a good case because he actually comes as the machmir and everything, which we haven't seen too much of lately. But I think again it comes to the idea why each stage is so important, and that is why the moment you have Eino ben Yomo, everything's permissible. The moment you have a ben Yomo, the moment you use that ladle Shabbos morning and using it again Motzei Shabbos, that is really where everything begins to fall apart. All it would have taken to have everything permissible was an extra few more hours, right? And by the way, remember, stam kelim, the default when you pull your spoon or you pull a ladle from a drawer, that it hasn't been used in the past 24 hours. Unless you know for sure, we assume that it wasn't used in 24 hours, and again, it has to be used 24 hours for something hot. You have a spoon for cereal, that's not considered being used for something hot, which will help you too. Look, these are the reasons why, these are definitely the reasons why there's, we have 2 sets of dishes, try to keep things separate, try to avoid splashes, we try to avoid everything, in order so we don't have these, we label everything, so why we could avoid all these potential issues, because they could potentially cause a lot of havoc around the kitchen. There's one thing that I wanted to mention in terms of an oven. In terms of an oven, I might have mentioned this a long time ago, but a lot of people ask this, and it's worthwhile reiterating. I have no idea what their chapter on ovens say. I didn't actually look at it yet. It's between lesson 19 and 24. Maybe it's lesson 20. Actually, it's between 20 and... It's either 20, 21, 22, or 23. I'm not quite sure which one it is. But there is an opinion out there that people, have asked me. Someone got a call on Erev Shavuos saying, oh my goodness, we made a cheesecake for Shavuos, and we just cooked our chicken just a couple of hours earlier. What do we do with our cheesecake? So it's important to remember that the ovens that we have today are all vented, meaning there's some usually under one of the elements above your stove. There's a vent, therefore it's not completely sealed, and therefore steam has where to leave your oven. That's a government regulations. And 2, also, we have what's called tanur gadol. Our tanurs are considered large ovens. So in Chazal, they also had a concept of a small oven. It's like a toaster oven, considered a small oven. I don't even think toaster ovens are vented. I don't think they are. So in large ovens, there's much room to be lenient, and you don't really have to wait 24 hours in between dairy and milk, between fleshchicks and milchiks in an oven. Just have to make sure there's no splashes, obviously, make sure there's nothing dirty going on there. Splash meat sauce before you cook milchiks. Wait for your oven to cool down a little bit, and then you'll be allowed to cook the other gender. It should be covered, and if it is not covered, it's actually okay. Yeah. That might no. I don't know what. It could be they don't say that. Yeah, I know. People have become very machmir on ovens. It's become a big fad. I think it's actually because of the article of dairy and milk safer. I think the ones that talk about having ovens and waiting 24 hours. I know growing up, I know Rabbi Taub, I know Rav Schachter, YU. Everyone's like, I don't understand. All of a sudden, everyone's become so machmir on ovens. Our ovens today are lots of room for leniencies. You know, the Gemara even said you can actually cook milk and fleishik in the same oven. It's not a problem. We don't do it. We're about splashing. But really, Mikari did nothing wrong. There could be no, if it's an gadol, if it's vented, we don't do it. But for sure, afterwards, you could do it. For sure, afterwards. And if you're worried about the cheese that's on the stuck in your oven, okay, so that maybe there's cheese in your oven, and that maybe potentially will go into your chicken that's not being covered. So maybe those will be issues of concern. But generally speaking, for sure, things are covered. It's not a problem. And even if it's been a few hours later and there's no residue of food, it can also be permitted as well. Okay, thank you so much, guys, for coming.